I found a beaten and worn, right in the rain trail journal at the GW Outerbridge Shelter, along with this entry in the logbook. It followed me out of the woods 2 weeks ago. I came back to try to escape it. After what I found, I don't think I can go, or will ever be allowed, back to my normal life. I'm northbound. If I don't sign the next logbook, please tell my family I tried. Godspeed. What follows is quoted directly from the trail journal I found on the Appalachian Trail. The writing appears agitated, frantic almost, like an essay written by a grade schooler that needs to be finished before he can go out and play, or someone trying to record their last words, listening to their own ticking clock winding down to zero. In some spots, raindrops, or maybe tears, blur the ink slightly. As Jack did, I'm trying to leave this and my story as a warning, in hopes you can avoid the terrible fate I feel myself spiraling towards. The cycle repeats. But then again, how else would the creatures eat? I am Jack's tethered soul. When I look back, I can pinpoint the moment it first ensnared me and started its observations. I wasn't the last one to bed down that night. Who knows why it chose me? Midnight, second night back in my bed. My eyes and consciousness snap open. Awareness switched from 0 to 100 in a blink. The edibles, a bedtime Betty, and 4 THC tablets, plus the extra bowl as a nightcap had worked, but only temporarily. 2 hours, almost exactly. And there was that feeling, sharper than last night even. Electricity, like the ground under the tent, where now the bed was electrified. I had to get up. The feeling was overwhelming. How the fuck is this even possible? Almost 20 hard miles in a weekend and almost no sleep. I should be exhausted. I am exhausted. Yet I'm pacing in the spare bedroom like a lion in a small town zoo. The enclosure slowly closing in around me. The feeling of current is accompanied by a return of the other feelings I experienced in the woods, an event I've now dubbed the tethering. Panic, claustrophobia, an evil presence, and a sense of being systematically hunted. I'm forced to witness the scene again, but from outside my body, maybe even through the eyes of whatever is still watching me. Tucked into some thicket, about 20 feet from the edge of our camp, I'm able to watch myself tiredly stumble back toward the fire after tending to nature. I say goodnight to the last 2 guys packing up and getting in their hammocks, and crawl in our little 2-person tent next to my partner. A few minutes of quiet go by, maybe 10. Time is tough to follow in this disassociated form. And then the panicked fight with the zipper. Zipper winning temporarily. Out pops a mostly naked body, clad only in shorts and shiny with sweat. I remember feeling trapped in the tent, increasing anxiety, and then fear. The fear was taking over. I had to get out of that tent. Once I got out of my sleeping bag, I didn't cool off like I anticipated. Instead, I started sweating more profusely. Now I'm standing outside in 40-degree, foggy weather, smoking a bowl to calm down. About halfway through the bowl, I'm relaxing, but starting to shiver from the cold. Well, maybe it was cold. I remember having a bone-chilling sensation of being watched, and not benevolently. As we look on, I begin a new fight with the zipper and climb awkwardly into the tent. Once the zipper closes all the way, reality blinks, and I'm back in my apartment, staring at the wall. Fuck this. Midnight, night 4. That same feeling of electrical current racing under my skin at midnight. The same nightmares. The overwhelming anxiety. It all returns every night. I just want a few hours of sleep. Something's out there. Something is doing this on purpose. It's tracking me, and it wants me to panic. It's trying to get me to make mistakes and drift away from the protection of the herd. 2 a.m. I've decided I have to go back into the woods and face my fears, or confront whatever the fuck this entity is that's slowly eroding the sanity from my life. 5 p.m. 7 days since the tethering. Back on the AT. Just found my home for the night, a small site about 1/10 of a mile off the trail. This is one of the few areas I don't mind hiking by myself, as I've done it many times with friends. I'm near Bake Oven Knob, or Easy Bake Oven as we call it. Though I was a little worried for my headspace, especially being in a tent again, I feel oddly calm being back in the woods. And then again, it has always been my sanctuary. This reassures me this is exactly what I needed. A night in the woods, alone, to relax. Troubles mostly forgotten, I begin to unpack and set up camp. My biggest concern? Whether to make a mountain house or ramen for dinner. With the tent up, I boil some water, confident by the time it's ready I'll have made a decision. (10:22 p.m.) I awake suddenly to the feeling of some large, unknown force slowly enveloping me around the middle and tightening its grip. What the fuck is this? It feels like a lasso has drawn tight around my midsection, threatening to squeeze the air out of me. I desperately fumble with my sleeping bag, struggle with the zipper, and finally open it and start feeling around my torso. My hands feel nothing, but the squeeze tightens slightly. Panic escalating, I begin to fumble with the zipper on the tent, adding frustration to my emotional shitstorm. Out loud now, I'm cursing the inventor of the zipper and the person who decided this flawed one was the best one for my tent. But I'm finally able to break free, possibly at the expense of tearing the tent. However, that concerns me little at the moment, and I stumble out into the dark. The lasso analogy takes another step now, as whatever is around me gives a gentle pull, and I half involuntarily started walking away from my tent. I say half because I'm moving my legs, but it's because I'm being compelled forward by this tether. I have no source of light, but thankfully the moon is high and bright. I can see there has been a definite change in my surroundings. It's May. The forest has been green and alive for weeks now. Maybe it's the moonlight or the dark, but everything looks dead. Not green, not full of leaves. What leaves there are brown, the trees showing no signs of life. It's a balmy 70-degree night, but it looks like January, and suddenly I am chilled. I was pulled gently toward the trail, but now that I'm on the AT, the pressure increases. I move faster. I come to a fork in the road I recognize. Last time I was here, there were 2 signs, one for the Devil's Pulpit and one saying, "Caution, Devil's Pulpit closed." The Devil's Pulpit is an overlook on the side of the mountain with a beautiful view of the valley below and a really cool looking rock formation at the top of a small boulder field on the side of a mountain. The formation does indeed resemble a pulpit, especially the way it is oriented over the valley. It's a super cool spot, especially at night. My first visit, I lit up a joint and spent the entirety of the session just looking out at the valley and all the lights and the matchbox-sized traffic below. Tonight, however, as I bore right toward the pulpit, I noticed in lieu of a sign, someone or something had carved the pulpit, with an arrow pointing right into the dead and rotting tree in the middle of the fork. Not sure what that portends, but it can't be good. The trail opens in front of me into a sea of rocks. As I start down the slight hill, my trajectory abruptly changes as I'm pulled to the left, toward the pulpit. In the moonlight, I can see blood on all the rocks surrounding me. Some are splatters, like the comedian Gallagher was smashing crimson watermelons on the pulpit. Others are more of a smear, like a wounded animal was trying to drag itself to safety, or from a predator parading its kill. Still, without any control over where my feet were taking me, I approached the pulpit. The woods are utterly, ominously silent. I climb on the pulpit and lay on my back and stare at the sky. It seems lit up from moonlight, though I see no moon. The atmosphere has a ruddy, sailor take warning hue to it, even though it's probably close to midnight by now. I see no stars, yet no clouds. And then I hear the loudest sound I've ever heard in my life. It starts as a low rumble, then builds into a roar. I imagine it's what it would sound like being in the closed compartment of a diesel engine when it fires up. It goes on for about 5 to 6 seconds, and it was the only thing in the world for that time. When it stopped, the silence seemed just as deafening. I'm frozen with fear, and I can feel tears streaming down the sides of my face down into the pulpit. I can detect breathing less than 10 feet away, an assessing sniff at first that started to quicken as it got closer. I could only lay paralyzed as whatever it was circled the pulpit, stopping to smell my head, hands, then feet. I felt a claw on my right arm, starting by the wrist, and dragged up my forearm searchingly up to my elbow. A big sniff, seeming to taste the air, then another guttural roar, inches from my prone body. At this point, I must have passed out, and whatever it was, mercifully or unmercifully, left me on the pulpit, physically unscathed. When I came to, it was silent and dark. After some preliminary testing and shaking of the appendages, I found I had control of my limbs again, so I scrambled off the rock and headed back to the tent as fast as I could without running. I didn't want to trigger something, anything, to chase me. When I got back to my tent, I saw that I hadn't closed it behind me, and something had ransacked my stuff. My clothes and gear were strewn all over the campsite, almost mockingly. My food was undisturbed, which baffles me. An animal would have taken that and that alone. But I'm tired, sore, and afraid. So I gather the essentials and slide back into my sleeping bag. The next morning, as I emerged from the tent, the first thing I noticed was how green the forest was again. Maybe last night was a dream. Then I noticed some of my stuff still thrown about that I hadn't regathered last night. Okay, maybe it's a nightmare, and I'm still in it. Also really confusing is the fact that the sun appears to be setting. Could it really be the next evening already? There's no way I could have slept in the hot tent all day without waking up for something. But I've seen a lot of the sun's comings and goings out here, and this really looks like sunset. I re-inspect my food and see I have sufficient rations to hunker down for the night. I set about preparing a fire and breakfast/dinner. I hang my hammock, which I have been wanting to try out, and hope it'll be more comfortable and easier to navigate than the tent. I update my journal, grab my book, House on the Borderlands, and read until sleep steals me away.